Chapter 29 of the Countess of Charny by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Crown of Ange's Love. A little over a year after the execution of the king, and the departure of Gilbert, his son, and Belay, on a fine cold morning of the hard winter of 1794, 300 or 400 persons, that is, a sixth of the population of Villers-Cotterêts, waited on the square before the manor house and in the mayor's yard for the coming out of two married folks, whom Mayor Longpre was uniting in the holy bonds. These were Ange Pitou and Catherine Belay. Alas, it had taken many grave events to bring the flame of Viscount Charny, the mother of little Isidore, to become Mistress Pitou. Everybody was chattering over these events, but in whatever manner they related and discussed them, there was always something to the greater glory of the devotion of Ange Pitou and the good behavior of Belay's daughter. Only the more interesting the couple were, the more they were pitied. Perhaps they were happier than any in the crowd, but human nature is inclined that way. It must pity or applaud. On this occasion, it was in the compassionate vein. Indeed, what Cagliostro had foreseen had come on rapidly, leaving a long track of blood after it. On the 1st of February, 1793, the issue of more paper money was agreed. In March, the fugitive nobles were perpetually banished and their property confiscated. In November, a new kind of religion was proposed instead of the established church. The result of the confiscation decree was that Belay and Gilbert, being considered fugitives, their lands were seized for the public good. The same fate befell the estates of the Charnys, the count having been killed and the countess murdered in prison. The consequence to Catherine was that she was turned out of Belay's farm, which was national property. Pitou wanted to protest, but Pitou was a moderate and a suspect, and wise souls advised him not to oppose the orders of the nation in will or deed. So Catherine and Pitou had gone over to Haramont. She had thought of taking refuge in Daddy Clovis's lodge, but he appeared at the door to lay his finger on his lips and shake his head in token of impossibility. The place was already occupied. The law on the banishment of refractory priests was still in force, and it is easy to understand that Father Fortier had banished himself, as he would not take the oath. But he had not felt like passing the frontier, and his exile was limited to his leaving his house in charge of his sister, to see the furniture was not stolen, and asking Clovis for shelter, which was granted. This retreat was only a cave, and it would with difficulty hold, in addition to the corpulent priest, Catherine, little Isidore, and Pitou. Besides, we recall the refusal of the priest to bury Mrs. Belay. Catherine was not good Christian enough to overlook the unkindness, and had she been so, the Abbé Fortier was too good a Catholic to forgive her. So they had to give up the idea of staying with old Clovis. This choice lay between Aunt Angelique's house and Pitou's lodgings at Haramont. They dared not think of the former. As the revolution had followed its course, Angelique had become more and more diabolical, which seems incredible, and thinner, which seems impossible. This change in her temper and her physique arose from the fact that the churches were closed at Villers as elsewhere, awaiting the invention of a reasonable and civic cult, according to the Board of Public Instruction. The churches being shut, Aunt Angelique's principal revenue from letting seats fell into disuse. It was the drying up of her income which made her tartar. We beg pardon, tartar and bonier than ever. Let us add that she had so often heard the story of Pitou and Belay capturing the Bastille, and so often seen them start off for Paris whenever any great event was to take place, that she did not in the least doubt that the French Revolution was led by Ange Pitou and Farmer Belay, with citizens Danton, Marat, Robespierre, and company playing the secondary parts. The priest's sister fostered her in these somewhat erroneous opinions, to which the regicidal vote of Belay had given the seal on heated fanaticism. Pitou ought not to think of placing the regicide's daughter under Angelique's roof. As for the petty accommodation at Haremont, how could he think of installing there were 3, souls in 2 rooms, while if they were comfortable it would set evil tongues wagging? It was more out of the question than Clovis's hut. So Pitou made up his mind to beg shelter for himself of Désir Maniquet. That worthy son of Haremont gave the hospitality which Pitou paid for in kind, but all this did not provide Catherine with a fixed habitation. Pitou showed her all the attentions of a loving friend and the affection of a brother, but poor Catherine was well aware that he did not love her like friend or brother. Little Isidore had something of the same idea, for the poor child, having never known the Viscount of Charny, loved him more perhaps, for Pitou was not merely the sweetheart of Catherine, but his slave. A skilful strategist must have understood that the way to win Catherine's heart was through the help of the little one. But we hasten to say that no such calculation tarnished the purity of Pitou's sentiments. He was just the simple fellow we met him at the first, unless on becoming a man he became simpler than ever. All his good gifts touched Catherine. She saw that Pitou adored her ardently to the point of fanaticism, and she caught herself wishing that she could repay so great a love and utter devotion with something better than friendship. Gradually, by dint of dwelling on her isolation from all the world, Pitou accepted, and on her boy being left alone if she were to die, Pitou again accepted. She came to giving Pitou the only reward in her power, her hand. Alas, her first love, that perfumed flower of youth, was in heaven. For 6 months Catherine had been nourishing this conclusion without Pitou suspecting that the wind was blowing up in his favor, though her welcoming was a shade warmer and her parting a trifle more lingering each time. So she was forced to speak the first. But women take the lead in such matters. One evening, instead of offering her hand, she held up her cheek for a kiss. Pitou thought she had forgot and was too honest to take advantage of a mistake. But Catherine had not let go his hand, and she drew him closer to her. Seeing him still hesitate, little Isidore joining in, saying, "Why won't you kiss Mamma Catherine, Papa Pitou?" "Good gracious," gasped Pitou, turning pale as if about to die, but letting his cold and trembling lip touch her cheek. Taking the boy up, she put him in Pitou's arms and said, "I give you the boy, Ange. Will you have the mother?" This time it was too much for the swain, whose head swam. He shut his eyes, and while he hugged the child, he dropped on a chair and panted with the delicacy which only a delicate heart could appreciate. "Oh, Master Isidore, how very fond I am of you!" Isidore called Pitou Papa Pitou, but Pitou called him Master Isidore. That is why, as he felt that love for her son had made Catherine love Ange, he did not say, "Oh, how dearly I love you, Catherine." This point settled that Pitou thought more of Isidore than of Catherine, they spoke of marriage. "I don't want to seem in a hurry," said the man, "but if you mean to make me happy, do not be too long about it." Catherine took a month. At the end of 3 weeks, Ange, in full regimentals, went respectfully to pay a visit to Aunt Angelique, with the aim to inform her of his near-at-hand union with Catherine Belay. Seeing her nephew from afar, she hastened to shut her door, but he did not hold back from the inhospitable door whence he had once been expelled. He rapped gently. "Who is there?" snarled Angelique in her sourest voice. "I, your dutiful nephew, Ange Pitou." "Go on your bloody way, you September man of massacre!" cried Aunt Angelique. "Auntie, I come to tell you of a bit of news which cannot fail to make you jolly, because it is my happiness." "What is this news, you red-capped Jacobin?" "I will tell you if you open the door." "Say it through the door. I shall not open to a breechless outlaw like you." If there is no other way, here you have it. I am going to get married." The door flew open as by magic.
"Who are you going to marry, you wretched fellow?"
asked the old spinster. "Catherine Belay, please."
"Oh, the villain, the scamp, the regicide!"
said the good soul.
"He marries a ruined girl. Get you gone, scapegrace! I curse you!"
With a gesture quite noble, she held up her dry and yellow hands toward her nephew. "Dear aunt," replied the young man, "you ought to know that I am too well hardened to your maledictions to care a fig for them. I only wanted to do the proper thing by inviting you to dance at my wedding. If you won't come, still, I have asked you to shake a leg."
"Shake? Fie, for shame!"
"Very well, sweet Aunt Angelique." Touching his cocked hat in the military manner, Pitou made a salute to his relative and hurried away. End of chapter 29. Recording by John Van Stan, Savannah, Georgia. Chapter 30 of The Countess of Charny by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. This LibriVox recording is in a public domain. The effect of happy news. Pitou had to tell his intended marriage to Mayor Longpre, who lived hard by. Less said against the Belay family than Angelique, he congratulated Pitou on the match. Pitou listened to his praise without seeing where he was doing very much of a noble action. By the way, as a pure Republican, Pitou was delighted to find that the Republic had done away with the publication of the bans and other ecclesiastical trammels which had always galled true lovers. It was therefore settled between the mayor and the suitor that the wedding should take place on the following Saturday at the town hall. Next day, Sunday, the sale of the Charny estate and the Belay farm was to come off, the latter at the upset price of 400,000, and the other at 600,000 in paper money. Assignats were dropping fearfully. The gold louis was worth 920 francs in paper. But then, nobody ever saw a gold piece nowadays. Pitou had run all the way back to acquaint Catherine with the good news. He had ventured to anticipate the marriage day by 48 hours, and he was afraid he should vex Catherine. She did not appear vexed, and he was lifted up among the angels, his namesakes. But she insisted on his going once more to Aunt Angelique's to announce the exact date of the wedding day and invite her to be at the ceremony. She was the bridegroom's sole relative, and, though not at all tender toward him, he ought to do the proper thing on his side. The consequence was that on Thursday morning Pitou went over to Villers-Cotterêts to repeat the visit. 9 o'clock was striking as he got in sight of the house. The aunt was not on the doorstep, but the door was closed anyway, as if she expected his call. He thought that she had stepped out, and he was delighted. He would have paid the visit, and a polite note with a piece of wedding cake after the ceremony would acquit the debt to courtesy. Still, he was a conscientious fellow. He went up to the door and knocked. As no answer came to his raps, he called. At the double appeal of knuckle and voice, a neighbor appeared at her own door. "Do you know whether or no my aunt has gone out, eh, Mother Fagot?" asked Pitou.
"Has she not answered?"
asked Dame Fagot. "No, she has not, as you see, so I guess she has gone out for a gossip." Mother Fagot shook her head.
"I should have seen her go out," she said. "My door opens the same way as hers, and it is pretty seldom that in getting up of a morning she does not drop into our house to get some warm ashes to put in her shoes, with which the poor dear lamb keeps her toes warm all the day. Ain't that so, neighbor Faberley?"
This question was addressed to a fresh character, who, likewise opening his door, shoved his conversational oar into the parley.
"What are you talking about, Madame Fagot?" I was a-saying that Aunt Angelique had not gone out. Have you seen anything of her?" "That I hain't, and I am open to wager that she has not gone out. Otherwise her shutters would not be open, do you see?"
"By all that is blue, that is true enough," remarked Pitou. "Heavens, I hope nothing unfortunate has happened to my poor aunt."
"I should not wonder," said Mother Fagot.
"It is more than possible. It is probable," said Farelay sententiously.
"To tell the truth, she was not over-tender to me," went on Pitou. "But I do not want harm to befall her for all that. How are we going to find out the state of things?"
"That is not a puzzle," suggested a third neighbor, joining in. "Send for Rigolo, the locksmith."
"If it is to open the door, he is not wanted," said Pitou. "I know a little trick of prying the bolt with a knife."
"Well, go ahead, my lad," said Farelay. "We are all witnesses that you pick the lock with the best intentions and your pocket-knife."
Pitou had taken out his knife, and in the presence of a dozen persons attracted by the occurrence, he slipped back the bolt with a dexterity proving that he had used this means of opening the way more than once in his youth. The door was open, but the interior was plunged into complete darkness. As the daylight gradually penetrated and was diffused, they could descry the form of the old girl on her bed. Pitou called her by name twice, but she remained motionless and without response. He went in and up to the couch. "Halloo!" he exclaimed, touching the hands. "She is cold and stark." They opened the windows. Aunt Angelique was dead. "What a misfortune!" said Pitou.
"Tush!" said Farelay. "A hard winter is coming, and wood never so dear. She saves by departing where the firing is plentiful. Besides, your aunt did not dote on you."
"Maybe so," said Pitou with tears as big as walnuts. "But I liked her pretty well. Oh, my poor auntie," said the big baby, falling on his knees by the bed.
"I say, Captain Pitou," said Mademoiselle Fagot, "if you want anything, just let us know. If we ain't good neighbors, we ain't good for anything."
"Thank you, Mother. Is that boy of yours handy?"
"Yes. Hey, Fagotin,"
called the good woman. A boy of 14 stood frightened at the door. "Here I am, Mother," he said. "Just bid him trot over to Harriman, to tell Catherine not to be uneasy about me, as I have found my Aunt Angelique dead. Poor aunt." He wiped away fresh tears. "That is what is keeping me here."
"You hear that, Fagotin? Then off you go."
"Go through Soissons Street," said the wise Farelay, "and notify Citizen Reynal that there is a case of sudden death to record at old Miss Pitou's."
The boy darted off on his double errand. The crowd had kept increasing till there were 100 before the door. Each had his own opinion on the cause of the decease, and all whispered among themselves,
"If Pitou is no fool, he will find some hoard smuggled away in an old sock, or in a crock, or in a hole in the chimney."
Dr. Reynal arrived in the midst of this, preceded by the head tax-gatherer. The doctor went up to the bed, examined the corpse, and declared to the amaze of the lookers-on that the death was due to cold and starvation. This redoubled Pitou's tears. "Oh, poor aunt," he wailed, "and I thought she was so rich. I am a villain for having left her to poverty. Oh,
had I only known this! It cannot be, Dr. Reynal."
"Look into the hutch and see if there is any bread. In the wood box, and see if there is any firewood. I have always foretold that the old miser would end up in this way."
Searching, they found not a crumb or a splinter.
"Oh, why did she not tell me this?" mourned Pitou. "I would have chopped up some wood for her, and done some poaching to fill the larder. It is your fault, too," the poor fellow added, accusing the crowd. "You ought to have told me that she was in want."
"We did not tell you that she was in want," returned wiseacre Farellet, "for the plain reason that everybody believed that she was rolling in riches."
Dr. Reynal had thrown the sheet over the cold face and proceeded toward the door when Pitou intercepted him.
"Are you going, doctor?"
"Why, what more do you expect me to do here?"
"Then she is undoubtedly dead? Dear me, to die of cold and hunger, too."
Reynal beckoned him.
"Boy, I am of the opinion that you should none the less seek high and low," he said.
"But, doctor, after your saying she died of want—"
"Misers have been known to die the same way, lying on their treasures. Hush," he said, laying a finger on his lips and going outdoors.
End of chapter 30. Recording by John Van Stan, Savannah, Georgia. Chapter 31 of The Countess of Charny by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Easy Chair. Pitou would have pondered more deeply on what the doctor told him, only he spied Catherine running up with her boy in her arms. Since there was no doubt that Aunt Angelique had died of privation, the eagerness of the neighbors to help her nephew had lessened. So Catherine arrived most timely. As she might be considered the wife of Pitou, it was her place to attend to his aunt, which the good creature set about doing with the same tenderness she had shown a while before to her own mother. Meanwhile, Pitou ran out to arrange for the funeral, which would be at 2 days' time, as the suddenness of the death compelled retention of the remains 48 hours. Religious ceremonies being suppressed for funerals as for marriages, he had only to do business with the sexton and the grave digger, after the mayor. Before he departed, Catherine suggested that the marriage should be deferred for a day or two, as it would look strange for an act so important and joyous as a wedding to be performed on the same day as he conducted his aunt's remains to the cemetery.
"Besides, my dear, it is bad luck to have a wedding while a grave is open."
"Stuff," said Pitou. "From the moment I am your husband, I defy misfortune to get a grip on me."
"Dear Pitou, let us put it off till Monday," said the bride, holding up her hand to him. "You see that I am trying to make your wishes suit proprieties." "But 2 days is a deuce of a long time, Catherine." "Not when you have been waiting 5 years." "A lot of things may happen in 48 hours," moaned Pitou. "My falling off in love cannot happen, Ange. And as you pretend that is the only thing in the world which concerns you—" "Lord, yes, Catherine, the only thing." "Why, then, look here, Isidore. Say to Papa Pitou, 'Do not be afraid, Papa Pitou. Mamma loves you dearly and will always love you.'" The child repeated this in his pretty voice. On this assurance, Pitou made no difficulty about going to the mayor's. He returned in about an hour with all settled and paid for. With what money he had left, he laid in a stock of wood and food for a couple of days. It was high time that the firing had come into the old, weather-worn house, where the wind poured in at many a chink, and they might perish of cold.
Pitou had found Catherine half frozen when he got back. According to Catherine's wish, the marriage was postponed until Monday. The intermediate time passed with the pair mourning by the deathbed. Despite the huge fire Pitou kept roaring, the wind came in so sharp and chill that Pitou acknowledged that if his aunt had not died of hunger, she must have been carried off by the cold. The time came for the removal of the corpse, the transit not taking long, as Aunt Angelique's dwelling adjoined the burial ground. All of that quarter, and other representatives of the town, went to the funeral, which Pitou and Catherine led as the chief mourners. When the ceremony terminated, Pitou thanked those attending in his name and that of the dead, and they all filed before him, throwing holy water into the old maid's grave. When left alone, Pitou looked round for Catherine and saw her and Isidore kneeling on another grave where cypresses were planted. It was Mother Belay's. Pitou had dug those 4 cypresses in the woods and transplanted them. He did not care to disturb them in this pious occupation, but thinking that Catherine would be very cold at the end of her devotions, he determined to run on before and have a good fire blazing at her return. Unfortunately, one thing opposed the realization of this good intention. They were out of wood. Pitou was in a pinch, for he was out of money, too. He looked round him to see if there was nothing good to burn. There was Aunt Angelique's bread safe, bed, and easy chair. The bed and cupboard were not unworn, but they were still good, while the armchair was so rickety that nobody but the owner had ever risked themselves in it. It was therefore condemned. Like the Revolutionary Tribunal, Pitou had no sooner condemned a thing than he proceeded to execute it. Pitou set his knee to the seat, and seizing one of the sides, gave a pull. At the third of such tugs, it gave way at the joints. It uttered a kind of squeak as if an animal capable of feeling pain and expressing emotion. If Pitou had been superstitious, he might have imagined that the aunt's spirit had located itself in her old armchair. But Pitou had no superstition except his love for Catherine. The article of furniture was doomed to warm her, and though it had bled in each limb like an enchanted tree, it would have been rent to pieces. He grasped the other arm with the same fierceness and tore that from the carcass, which began to look dismantled. Again the chair sent forth a sound strange and metallic. Pitou remained insensible. He took up the chair by one leg and, swinging the whole round his head, brought it down on the floor. This split the seat in half, and to the great astonishment of the destroyer, out of the yawning chasm spouted torrents of gold. Our readers will remember that it was Angelique's habit to change all her coppers into silver and them into gold pieces, which she stowed away inside her chair. When Pitou recovered from his surprise and dismay, his first impulse was to run out to Catherine and little Isidore and bring them into view the riches he had discovered. But the dreadful terror seized him that Catherine would not marry him if he were a rich man, and he shook his head. "No," he said, "she would refuse me." After reflecting for an instant, careworn and motionless, a smile passed over his face. No doubt he had hit on a means of surmounting the obstacle which this sudden wealth had raised. He gathered up the coins scattered on the floor, and poked about in the cushion with his knife for still more of the golden eggs. They were literally crammed into the lining. He reckoned, and there were 1,550 louis, otherwise 37,200 livres or francs, and at the discount in the favor of gold, he was the master of 1,326,000 livres. And at what a moment had this slice of good luck befallen him, when he was obliged to smash up the furniture from having no means to buy fuel for his wife. What a lucky thing that Pitou was so poor, the weather was so cold, and the old chair so rotten. Who knows what would have happened but for this happy conjunction of circumstances? He stuffed the coin away in all his pockets, and scraping the splinters together, he built a fire, which he managed to kindle with the unused flint and steel. He was no more than in time, for in came Catherine and little Isidore, shivering with cold. Pitou gave the boy a hug, kissed the woman's icy hands, and dashed out, crying, "Get warm! I have a piece of business to go through."
"Where does Papa Pitou go?"
asked the boy. "I do not know, but judging by the gait he is going at, it is for you or me." She might have said, "For you and me." End of chapter 31. Recording by John Van Stan, Savannah, Georgia. Chapter 32 of The Countess of Charny by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. What Pitou did with the find. It has not been forgotten that the Charny estate and the Gilbert and Belay farms were in the market at a price. On the sale day, Mayor Longpre bought for Mr. Cash the properties at the price of 1,350 gold louis, or the equivalent of assignats. This happened on Sunday, the eve of the day when Catherine and Pitou were married. At 11 on the following day, all the crowd were grieving that a fine fellow like Pitou should throw himself away upon a girl who was ruined utterly, with a child who was even more poverty-stricken than herself. When Mayor Longpre had pronounced Citizen Pierre Ange Pitou and Citizeness Anne Catherine Belay united in wedlock, he beckoned little Isidore to him. The youngster had been sitting upon the desk whence he slipped down and came to him.
"My boy," he said, "here are some papers which you will please give your mamma Catherine when Papa Pitou takes her home."
"Yes, sir,"
said the little fellow, taking 2 papers in his little hand. All was finished, only, to the great astonishment of the spectators, Pitou pulled out 5 gold pieces and handed them to the mayor, saying,
"For the poor of the parish."
"Are we rich?" asked Catherine, smiling.
"Happy folks are always rich," returned Pitou, "and you have made me the happiest man in creation."
He offered his arm to the wife, who leaned on it affectionately. On going forth, they found the crowd to which we have alluded. Unanimous cheers greeted the couple. Pitou saluted his friends and gave many handshakes. Catherine nodded to hers and gave many smiles. Pitou turned to the right.
"Why, where are you going, dearest?"
asked Madame Pitou.
"Come, my dearly beloved," he replied, "to a place you will be glad to see again."
"Why, you are going toward our old farm," she said.
"Come on, all the same,"
he persisted.
"Oh, Pitou,"
she sighed as he brought her over the well-remembered way.
"And I thought to make you happy."
He sighed too.
"How could you think to make me happy by taking me again to a place which was my parents', and which might have been mine, but which was sold yesterday to some stranger, whose name even I do not know? Only a couple of steps farther, that is all I ask of you."
They turned the corner of the wall and had the farm entrance before them. All the farm hands, carters, cowmen, dairymaids, ploughmen were there, with Father Clovis marshalling them, a bunch of flowers in his hand.
"I understand. You wanted me to be welcomed once more in the old home by those who, like me, will leave it forever. I thank you, dear."
Leaving her husband's arm and Isidore's hand, she ran forward to meet the people who surrounded her and bore her into the house. Pitou led Isidore, who was still carrying the papers, into the doorway, and they saw Catherine seated in the main room, staring about her as in a dream.
"In heaven's name, tell me what they are saying," she cried. "I do not understand a bit of what they are saying." "Perhaps these papers which the child has for you will make it all clear, dear Catherine," replied the husband. She took the papers from the little hand and read one by chance. I acknowledge that the manor house of Bourson and the lands dependent were bought and paid for by me yesterday, on behalf of Jacques Philip Isidore, minor son of Catherine Belay, and that consequently said house and lands are the property of the said son, Longpre, mayor of Villers-Cotterêts. What does this mean, Pitou? You must understand that I cannot make head or tail of it. Better read the other document, suggested the husband. Unfolding the second paper, Catherine read as follows. I hereby acknowledge that the farm called Pilays, with the lands and buildings thereon and the appurtenances thereof, were bought and paid for by me on behalf and for the account of Citizeness Anne Catherine Belay, and that it follows the said farms and lands and buildings belong to the said Citizeness Anne Catherine Belay. Longpre, mayor of Villers-Cotterêts, in heaven's name, tell me what all this means, or I shall go mad, said Catherine. The meaning is, rejoined Pitou, that, thanks to some gold found in my Aunt Angelique's old easy-chair, which I broke up to warm you, the house and manor of Charny will not go out of the family, or the farm from the Belays. Catherine understood all at last. She opened her arms to Pitou, and he pushed Isidore into them, but she leaned forward and enfolded husband and child in the same embrace. "Oh, God!" exclaimed Pitou, stifling with bliss, and yet unable to repress one tear for the old maid. "To think there are people who die of hunger and cold, like poor Aunt Angelique." "Faith!" said a stout teamster, nudging a rosy milkmaid for her to take particular heed of their new master and mistress. "I do not think that pair is going to die in any such way." Let us turn from these truly happy ones, in the peaceful country, to the bereaved widow of Louis XVI. In her lonesome jail, she mourns over the loss of all: husband, lover, friend. What can replace a Charny or an Andrea? She thinks there is no champion of the blood of either, for she knows not that Cagliostro's surmise was not baseless. When the son of Andrea shall know how his mother fell, he will fly to arms to avenge that loss and to spite her foes, who are also the queen's. We shall trace his gallant and desperate attempts to rescue the royal captive in the pages of the conclusion of this series, entitled The Knight of Redcastle, or The Captivity of Marie Antoinette. The End. End of Chapter 32. End of the Marie Antoinette Romances, Volume 5, The Countess of Charny by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. Recording by John Van Stan, Savannah, Georgia. Thanks for listening.